Alastair Campbell, who lost his rag at me once on Newsnight, almost came to blows, is a bully, an ex-alcoholic, a very unpleasant man, a man who's proven to have lied, a man who, frankly, allegedly could be held culpable for some pretty serious accusations, and yet he's paraded around the commentary circuit like a prize horse.
A new entry at number 40 on our list of the worst people in the UK today in Ed Balls, the Good Morning Britain propagandist. Now, the deep state censorship tool, the off-communists, have worked wonders to see GB News cucked and its outspoken presenters silenced. But they have no problem with this failed politician literally interviewing his own wife. Yes, during disgusting controversies over the past year, like Labour's Southport massacre cover-up, he lobbed softballs at his bed buddy Yvette Cooper with Susanna Reid nodding pathetically along. Don't even get me started on his centrist dad podcast with George Osborne. But Alex Phillips, great to see you, by the way. I guess in some ways this might be unfair on Ed Balls, the human being, right? Because for me, his entry on this list is all about double standards in the media. Like, how on earth is it possible for someone like you to be silenced during the election campaign, for someone like Nigel Farage to be constantly under attack because of his role on GB News, yet Ed Balls is literally allowed to interview his wife? It's nuts.
Yeah, but this has been the case for the long time. What's good for the goose isn't good for the gander.
Yep.
In terms of if you're left wing, the rules just don't apply to you. And the same is true with people who are in the sort of commentariat in circulation. I think of people like Alastair Campbell, who lost his rag at me once on Newsnight, almost came to blows, is a bully, an ex-alcoholic, a very unpleasant man, a man who's proven to have lied, a man who, frankly, allegedly could be held culpable for some pretty serious accusations, and yet he's paraded around the commentary circuit like a prize horse. And it was fine, wasn't it, when David Lammy had his show on LBC? That's okay, nothing to see here. But as soon as people in the right wing get to go on the airwaves, because of course for a long time Brexiteers were just crowded out, they weren't allowed, they were untouchables, they were ostracized from mainstream media. But as soon as, you know, the TV execs suddenly thought, well, hold on, our audience rather like this Brexit business, our audience quite like right-wing people, our audience are tuning out from the centrist dadism, let's get some of these folk from the other side on. Wow, all of a sudden then there needs to be extra regulations to make sure dangerous people like us are not allowed on the airwaves. And so in theory that should have provoked a massive problem for someone like Ed Balls, who isn't just himself a former shadow chancellor, that's not just being elected, that's an extremely senior position in a political party, a position he held for a very long time. But he's married to the current Home Secretary. He still goes to things like Labour conference. And yet I went to the Reform rally on Friday. Could I speak at the rally? No, because my own employer would be subject to a massive headache from Ofcom if I then went to present my programme. So it is about the duplicity and the hypocrisy of the media, where they will come up with a load of rules and regulations to stop politicians from being on the airwaves, but only if those politicians have the politics that they fundamentally disagree with.
Totally. But the thing is, Alex, the off-communists, right, are just a tool now to shut down dissenting voices, to effectively stop the media turning to the right. But I find it astonishing that when it came to Ed Balls and Yvette Cooper in that interview, they didn't even investigate.
Did they not even investigate?
No.
I mean, that's just shocking, isn't it? Because that's clearly, compromising. Because
there were thousands of complaints, because for once the right sort of did the same thing that the left does, Alex, right, and were like, oh, let's organise and let's get the complaints in. But it didn't matter because they just ignored all of the complaints and didn't even bother to investigate.
No, and this is always how it works, isn't it? And I'm glad you pointed out that the right were doing what the left do, because it isn't necessarily Ofcom themselves who suddenly trigger these investigations. The left are very good at weaponising anything, using litigation, using regulation, using, infiltrating systems, complaining to the police if someone's done something. This is very much in their playbook, which is why when people on the right wing pop up on television, there's a slew of complaints because they have an army of people ready to lodge those complaints, which isn't something the right wing tends to do. But it's utterly ridiculous that it wasn't even investigated, because if it had been investigated, it's quite clear he was interviewing his own wife. I mean, that really cannot be regarded as neutral, especially during the time of a political campaign. And not just, we're talking about a very senior politician, not some sort of man interviewing his local councillor wife or something like that. We're talking about this actually very much affecting politics, because her position is so senior and his show has a big legacy audience.
And at the time, by the way, they were speaking, I'll never forget it. I will never forget the interview, because it was during the so-called riots after the Southport massacre. And the point of the interview, and they literally admitted during the interview that they had been discussing this at home, so effectively pillow talk in bed. And it was all about, we've got to crack down on social media. That was the narrative. So it was effectively like an anti-free speech sort of thing. And indeed, we now learn that Yvette Cooper knew a hell of a lot at that point about Axel Rudakabana, about the truth of that man, that terrorist, that she was hiding from the public. So a lot of those people who were so-called rioters, many of whom were not violent at all, were actually correct in terms of what they were protesting about. But anyway, let's not get onto that. Let's move on in our countdown to number 39, a new entry from the professional victim, Ava Santina. Now, this man-hating MSN political pundit claims to be a dyed-in-the-wool lefty. That was until Lawrence Fox said he didn't want to shag her on my former GB News show, and she took the money to pose for a Daily Mail front page calling for the full-on censorship of the British media. By the way, I stand by the fact she is beautiful. Saying so doesn't make me a misogynist. I was just trying to provide a little bit of balance, But I think, to me, Alex Phillips, Ava Santina represents this new breed of the left-wing commentariat who I think are going to struggle in the independent space, because the moment the Daily Mail opened their checkbook, there she was.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it, about the left wing? They're suddenly realizing that their views aren't particularly popular anymore, that the general public aren't really interested in them. If it wasn't for the sort of sympathetic appointees and the czars in legacy media who push them and promote them, they wouldn't really have public-facing careers, because in and of themselves, they're hardly sort of, making moves and tearing things up and garnering a huge following. And yet they still need to earn their keep, don't they? And it's amazing how many Damascene revolutions there are along the way, with people who suddenly go, well, I used to think this way, but actually the scales have fallen from my eyes. And people who are suddenly adopting a more right-wing approach because it's the new rock and roll, because it suddenly is proven to be popular, proven to be where the market's at. I mean, look, Ava in and of herself, a nice woman. I've met her plenty of times. She's always friendly to get along with, but she is symptomatic of a huge problem we've had for a long time, which is this sort of lionization and beatification of people on the left wing. There's a guy at the moment, I can't remember his name, but he's a sort of former banker and now he's a socialist. And you can almost hear the gears, grinding away as they desperately try and pump this man out onto every channel and every platform, because he says things like wealth needs to be redistributed. The wealthy people need to be taxed more, despite, suddenly coming to these revelations after he himself has made millions. Because it's just they can't help getting off, they don't get off their ideological juggernaut, do they? They have to, ram raid us constantly with their broken belief system that people now can see has devastated the world. I mean, Ava, like anybody else, has got to make her money, and I think marketing forces are now dictating that money isn't in leftism.
Well, no, indeed. I guess I would just say, in terms of my personal experience, that the only reason that discussion with Lawrence Fox took place at all on GB News is because she had been so dismissive on the concept of there needing to be a minister for men, so dismissive of the shocking suicide statistics when it comes to men in the United Kingdom. And I do think she wants to be a professional victim because, of course, the pressure that I came under and everything, Alex, and I attempted to contact her and she just wasn't having it. So I think she used that situation. But first, I never recommend anything unless I truly believe in it. And today I've got something genuinely game-changing for you. Have you ever stopped to think about how crucial comfort is, especially down there? Well, let me tell you, today's Outspoken is proudly sponsored by Sheath Underwear, the revolutionary brand shaking up men's comfort across the globe. And here's what makes it even better. Sheath was founded by a US Army veteran, a brilliant guy called Robert Patton, while he was serving in Iraq back in 2007. That's right, this isn't just any underwear brand, it was designed for the toughest conditions imaginable. Patton was battling relentless heat and discomfort in full combat gear, and he thought there has to be a better way, so he created it. And let's be honest, traditional underwear just doesn't cut it anymore. Sheath's innovative dual pouch design ensures your comfort all day long, keeping things separate, cool, and fresh. Imagine your essentials being comfortably cradled away from unwanted friction and heat. Trust me, this is genuinely transformative. I have personally tested these at the gym, on long days at work, even just relaxing at home. And I'm telling you, once you've experienced Sheath, there's simply no going back. They're stylish, they're supportive, and they're designed to deliver unmatched comfort. It's actually like upgrading from economy to first class, but for your underwear. And right now, I'm offering you an exclusive 20% discount at www.sheath.com. Yes, that's 20% off your entire order when you use my special promo code Outspoken at checkout. So, what are you waiting for? Sheath is the perfect present, by the way, if you're shopping for your husband, your boyfriend, your son, your brother, or your hard-to-buy best mate. And ladies, don't worry. Look at them. Female versions available online too. This is very exciting. I love this. Sheath is also the first official underwear brand of the UFC. So click the link below, enter Outspoken at checkout, and thank me later when you're feeling comfortable, confident, and ready to tackle anything your day throws at you. Sheath Underwear, www.sheath.com, redefining comfort one pair at a time. But now, back to the show. Let's move on in our list to number 38, and it's Jonathan Reynolds, a new entry for the lying business secretary. And look, of course, the UK's incompetent Labour cabinet would hire someone for the business brief, Alex, who couldn't even be honest about his own CV. And let's be honest, his mortifying apology for lying about being a solicitor should have immediately resulted in his resignation. But of course, the corrupted MSM let him get away with it because he's one of their guys. He has zero business experience, but his wife is a key advisor to Slippery Starmer. And I think, look, he made a big mistake. He apologized for it, but no one in the MSM would ever have allowed a Conservative minister to quite literally mislead Parliament about what their job had been, Alex.
Yeah, I know. It is actually ridiculous. I mean, at least we don't really stand much chance of getting accused of libel by him because he never even became a solicitor, did he? But
No,
this is the thing.
He didn't see it through. And you know why he didn't see it through? Because he was one of those young political people, you know, who just got a gig very early on, didn't want to be in the real world, Alex.
And did you know not a single cabinet member at present has ever run a business? Not one has ever been in the private sector or run a business, which says a lot, doesn't it? But it is, again, symptomatic of this sort of two-tier system, the system where if you do something on the right wing, you're terrible. People are going, resign, resign. When are you going to resign? Are you going to sack him? But you don't hear those same questions and challenges being put towards the Labour Party. And when you see of the things that are going on, you know, Rachel Reeves' incredible CV, his completely made up baloney CV, some of the other, you know, behaviours of people in that cabinet, and no one ever says, oh, are you going to sack him? Are you going to resign? Is he going to be replaced? Did he lie to Parliament? And these people, worst of all, are just downright incompetent. They can't even lie very well. So again, it's another symptom of a far bigger problem that we have, which is the fact that leftism is constantly associated with goodness, with fit for government, with righteousness, with moral rectitude, and usually it's none of those things.
No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But of course, the business secretary is just a political activist, right? A political activist who very briefly trained in Manchester as a junior solicitor. I mean, isn't it astonishing that out of all of their hundreds of MPs, virtually all of them are just dyed in the wool Labour activists, and that's why they got their jobs. And I believe, Alex, that's why the country is in deep, deep trouble. But moving on in our list to number 37, and she's plummeted 10 points from last year. This is Sangeeta Miska, the race-baiting axed LBC loudmouth. Now, the hard left broadcaster has fallen down the list this year because she was axed, of course, from her show on the Labour Broadcasting Company. Why she was axed depends on which nasty lefty you believe. Her allies say it was for her anti-Israel interviews, while her former colleague, James O'Brien, insists her ratings were actually really bad. How kind of him. But she still operates in a new lefty gang, including fellow axed LBC host Carol Vorderman and axed GB News pundit Narinder Kaur. And so, of course, when she lost the LBC show, Alex, she did fall down the list because she has lost a lot of her influence on the left. She hasn't launched anything successful independently. However, it is very, very interesting, isn't it? How a bit like on the right with GB News, you're only allowed to operate within a certain Overton window.
Right, exactly. And isn't it funny how when they get booted out because they don't perform very well, they all sort of gang up together and decide they're booted out for other nefarious reasons. So it must be targeting them because they're a woman, or, you know, they can't get rid of that sort of victim status. And good. It's nice to see the world healing. It's nice to see sort of human nature winning the day at large when all of a sudden you realize that the companies are now turning around and, do you know what, Dan? I've heard gossip actually that Global have looked at their lineup and gone, this isn't where the audience is at. We need to start getting people on board with different politics other than just Nick Ferrari. We need to get people who represent the wider worldview. They're looking at election results. They're looking at polling, suddenly going to saying we can't stick our heads in the sand anymore. And farewell to these people who once got paid ludicrous sums of money for being not very intelligent, not very entertaining, and in no way in touch with the people of Britain. It's great to see finally that this automatic accelerant, this automatic promotional opportunity or upper hand that people got simply for being Labour or left wing seems to be beginning to crumble.
And I think this is going to happen more and more, right, Alex, because we are seeing a complete failure by the left-wing media to hold the Labour government to account. And indeed, I actually think it's something the right-wing media was pretty good at when it came to the Conservatives. So, for example, I think of my time on talk radio, and all of the talk radio presenters at that point, you know, Julia Hartley-Brewer, Mike Graham, we were hammering Boris Johnson over lockdown every single day. We hammered Theresa May over Brexit every single day. But they're so tribal that this government, which, let's be honest, has done appalling things, is not being held to account by the left-wing media. And so I think the ratings will keep going down.
Yeah, not before the election, not since the election. And it won't happen because, you know, sadly, a lot of people in legacy media, in order to get to those positions, they had to go to the best journalism schools. To go to the best journalism schools, they had to have gone to the best universities. To go to the best universities, they had to have gone to the best schools. And then to get into the profession, it's so nepotistic. You have to know people who work in a newsroom to get a leg up. So it's always going to be children of politicians, children of other broadcasters. And so what happens is you get a load of people who they live in an echo chamber. The only people they ever meet have exactly the same politics as they do, and they're not exposed to the real world. I don't know the last time an actual BBC correspondent or LBC presenter found themselves having fish and chips on a seafront or going to a Wetherspoons for an all-day breakfast or a mixed grill. I mean, they kind of regard people in the sort of huge underbelly of society, the majority of people who are the working classes and the lower middle classes, as disgusting aliens. opinions, but at the end of the day, that's your audience. That's real Britain. These are people who we know, Dan, and who we love and who we represent, because these are the people who stand up and represent the country, fight for the country, keep food on shelves,
Totally.
farmers in fields, factory workers on production lines. That is what Britain is.
Totally. Real Britain. And you're right that they're not doing that, Alex. Instead, they're at Soho House having a quinoa salad with vegan tofu. And that is the ecosystem in which they operate.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.